2012, I sat down with my girlfriend, and after 18 months of dating, I decided it was time to reveal the darkest secret of my family. It was a burden I had carried for a long time, a weight that had become unbearable. 3 weeks after that conversation, I came home from work, tired and anxious to share a quiet moment, only to find that all her things had disappeared. A breakup letter lay on the kitchen table, and as I read it, I felt the world crumble around me. I learned not to talk about this with anyone except my sister. However, I also felt that if I didn't bring this up from time to time, it would consume me from the inside, like a fire slowly devouring everything in its path. I've survived until now by talking to therapists, who have been my confidants in this dark journey, but at this point, therapy had become something akin to what atheists see in confessionals, a pleasant novelty but ultimately inconsequential. The internet, on the other hand, is a completely different beast. Not only can I remain anonymous, but you can too, allowing me to express myself in ways I would never dare face to face. It allows me to receive your complete and unfiltered opinions, no matter how brutal they may be. But I'm okay with that, and that's why I'm writing this. Because I'm not seeking absolution, I'm seeking judgment. I was 12 years old when I made my discovery, and that entire summer, I was consumed by an obsession with Pokémon Red. I spent endless hours capturing and training the original 150 Pokémon. I remember the thrill of defeating the Elite Four and completing my Pokédex, only to immediately erase my save file and start again. It was clear how much I loved playing Pokémon. However, my parents found a way to punish me whenever I misbehaved. For the most part, they were great parents, and my mischief was mostly harmless, but whenever I forgot to do my chores or was rude to my sister, their preferred item of confiscation was my Game Boy. The punishment worked like this: they would hide it somewhere, but I always managed to find it. Then, they'd catch me playing and take it away again. This meant I spent a lot of time snooping around my parents' bedroom and my dad's office. Since it was still summer vacation, I had plenty of time to do so. It was during these little searches that I discovered my father had a secret space hidden in his office. He usually kept it locked, but one afternoon while snooping, I found the key. My father owned an old cabinet that stored all sorts of objects, and I knew he sometimes hid my Game Boy there. So, after having no luck in other places, I started searching inside. I remember reaching into one of the lower compartments, and as I leaned in a little too much, I heard a dull wooden crack as the back wall of the cabinet suddenly gave way. Looking inside, with my heart pounding from excitement and fear, I saw a small hidden compartment. Due to the dim light, the only thing I recognized at first was a gun, but there was also something that looked like a letter and, more importantly, something shaped like my Game Boy. I reached out to grab it, but as soon as I touched it, I realized it wasn't my Game Boy. It felt like leather, not the plastic I was used to. My curiosity got the better of me, so I pulled it out of the hiding spot to see what it was. It was a journal, an old leather-bound journal, and when I opened it, I recognized my father's handwriting. I could identify his handwriting, but I definitely didn't understand most of what was written. The entries were clearly dated, but what followed was an unintelligible mess of abbreviations, words, and phrases. There were also small hand-drawn diagrams that looked like beds, along with stick figures whose limbs were contorted in unnatural positions. I didn't fully understand what I was seeing, but I just knew that, because it was hidden, it was part of some secret side of my dad that he didn't show us. I was so filled with macabre curiosity that I felt the need to inspect the other things too. First came the gun. It was much heavier than they seem in movies, and much scarier too. I held it like it was made of glass, not even daring to touch the trigger. Then I put it back with the same slowness and care I had taken it with. I saved what looked like an envelope for last. I thought it would be sealed, but upon retrieving it, I saw it wasn't an envelope at all. It was one of those plastic cases that photo developers give you, the kind that holds all your photos and negatives. I thought it might contain family photos since those were the only ones I'd seen come out of a wallet like that. However, the only family member present in the photos was my father, and this version of him was unlike any other I had ever known. The first photos were of a bed in some place I didn't recognize. At first, it didn't seem very notable, but then I noticed the rope tied to the bedposts. That bad feeling that had started to form in my stomach began to intensify. The next photos showed a bunch of tools, all arranged on a wooden table. I noticed a few other things mixed in: a hammer, a manual drill, a pair of metal pliers, all home improvement tools. But there was also a scalpel and other surgical tools that looked so sharp they made me shudder. The following photographs I saw were of my father, but as I mentioned earlier, there was something really strange about him. He had taken a few selfies, and he seemed particularly interested in how his eyes looked, as some were close-up shots of them. I don't know why he didn't just look in the mirror, but then again, I had no idea why Dad was doing any of this, let alone why he wanted to hide it from us. However, when I saw the next photo, I had an intense feeling of dread, knowing I was seeing something he would never want me or Mom to see. I assumed the first person in the selfie was my father, but the face was covered by some sort of fabric sack made from black wire mesh, so I couldn't be 100% sure. Assuming he could see through it, there was no valid reason why my father would want to cover his face like that. There was no good reason he would want to use it as a blindfold, and the thought of him doing so filled me with dread. However, when I got to the next photos, that feeling was replaced by one of confusion. The photo showed a young Asian man smiling while posing next to an art installation somewhere downtown. The next photo was of my father smiling next to the same piece of art. I didn't recognize the boy, but I thought it was strange that he looked much younger than my dad. The happy vibe continued in some other photos. There were pictures of them drinking together at some bar, pictures of the Asian guy who seemed to be dancing. Everyone was all smiles in every photo. Suddenly, the vibe of the photos drastically changed. In the next one, he was standing awkwardly, with his arms at his sides and a slight look of fear on his face. The following photos showed him tied to the bed. He was looking at the camera, and the terror on his face was even more pronounced. The final photo showed a man with that fabric mask leaning over the boy. I couldn't see what they were doing, but the boy's legs were tense, pulling against the ropes that bound them, almost as if he were in intense pain. I remember having an incredibly visceral reaction to that last photo. So, after putting the photos back in the wallet, I tried to put everything back in the little hiding spot exactly as I had found it. After that, I gave up searching for my Game Boy, locked my dad's office, and spent the rest of the afternoon in my room, rocking back and forth, trying to forget everything. When my father came home from work, he just assumed I was mad at him for confiscating my Game Boy. Only my mom noticed that something deeper was going on, but I couldn't tell her what I had seen. If I did, it would be the end of my family as I knew it. So I just kept quiet. Not because I didn't care, but because I didn't want to burden my mom with it. I never looked at the journal again. Every time I tried, I thought of the Asian boy on the bed and my father's face. I knew I could never look at the part of my dad's life I thought I knew, so I moved on. Every time I thought I had left the experience behind, something would come up to remind me of that afternoon. Over time, the experience faded over the years, and my interest in the journal faded until it eventually became a distant memory. A few years passed, and one afternoon I found myself thinking about that journal while walking to school. It was strange because I didn't even remember the things I had read, but the memory of that Asian boy, as well as the photos of my dad in the bed, were increasingly disturbing. I wondered if he ever knew what had happened to that boy. So, in a moment of clarity, I decided that I had to do something about it, that I needed to do the right thing. I wanted to confront my dad. I needed to know. So, that very night, I asked him about the journal. I mentioned it casually, and his reaction was immediately defensive. "What do you know about that?" he asked, his tone cold and sharp. In that instant, I knew I had awakened something dark. I stayed silent and watched as his face changed, darkening, as if a cloud had passed over his expression. I realized that he was afraid, a fear I had never seen in him before. His reaction plunged me into a deep state of anguish and anxiety. "It's nothing," it just seems like you keep it in a strange way." I tried to reassure him, but I knew there was no way I could come out of that conversation without some consequence. I felt like I had crossed a line I shouldn't have crossed. However, the fear on his face motivated me to continue. "What's wrong with you?" he continued, his voice now trembling slightly. "I told you not to touch it." It was the first time I noticed that he was losing his composure. "Why?" I asked, and the echo of my own voice seemed strange to me. "It's not like you're doing something wrong. You just keep it like a secret." At that moment, his anger turned into fear. I saw his hands trembling and his face turning pale. "Don't get involved in this, son. You don't understand what you're saying." The rest of the night was a mixture of words and shouting. He tried to explain himself, but I couldn't stop thinking about the journal. However, something inside me told me I should let it go. The conversation never reached a conclusion, it simply faded into the tense air between us. The experience left a mark on my relationship with him and, consequently, on my family. The rupture became imminent, and in the following years, the weight of that secret intensified. I embarked on a personal quest to understand what I had seen, exploring the pain and confusion that arose from that revelation. But with every discovery, I felt more lost. The path to the truth became a constant struggle between the need to know and the desire to ignore. Sometimes, I longed to return to those childhood days, to the innocence I had completely lost. After a while, I decided I couldn't continue like this. I needed to help others face their own secrets. So, although I never spoke to anyone about the journal, I began to open up about my own feelings of anguish and confusion. I made a conscious effort not to let my father's secret become a burden. I started writing, sharing my thoughts, and helping others who carried their own secrets. And, as I did, I learned that facing the past doesn't always mean unearthing old secrets. Sometimes, it means finding peace in the present and building a future free from the shadows of the past. I will never forget what I saw that day, nor what my father hid, but in the end, I learned to let it go. Not because I stopped caring, but because I understood that each of us has our own story of secrets and fears. So here I am, sharing this experience with the hope that it serves as a reminder, that our secrets, no matter how dark, don't have to define us. We all carry invisible burdens that can crush us, but by sharing our stories, by opening up to others, we can find light even in the darkest moments.